coming, he's a miracle birth, he preaches a message, and he's also in the last day. Yet Muhammad, peace be upon him, still fits in there as a prophet and a messenger, because he did what? He testified to the messenger before him, and all of them before, and he also mentioned that Jesus would be back. So there's plenty of room here for everybody. Okay, make sense? Everybody with me so far? The problem that the Jewish have with Jesus, okay, is that they don't want to accept a number of things. First of all, they don't want to accept that he is the miracle birth. They don't want to accept that the Immaculate Conception. They don't want to accept that he is the prophet. They don't want to accept that he is the Christ or the Messiah. And they don't want to accept that, that he did miracles, nor do they want to accept that he's going to come back in the last day. They're only looking for the Messiah to come in the last day, period. That's it. They don't believe that the Advent has taken place yet. For the Muslim, they say, no, he did come. He had a miracle birth. He was born to Miriam. There was no human intervention there. It's Immaculate Conception. Jesus, peace be upon him, is born. And one of the first miracles is that he actually spoke as a newborn baby and defended his mother against the charges that they brought against her for having an affair or something, and he, instead of her defending herself, the baby spoke and startled the people very much. I mean, a little baby speaking would shock anybody. But that is what we learn from the Quran, that he spoke and defended his mother. So this is the first miracle, but certainly not the last. People being cured of diseases, skin diseases, etc. People who were lame, crippled, and so on, being able to walk again. People who were born blind, and now they can see. Not restoring sight, which is certainly a miracle in itself. Somebody's blind to see again. But how about somebody that never saw before and now they can see? That would be amazing. And then and we're talking about curing people, how about curing people of death? And he brought somebody back to life who had actually been dead. None of these things are normal. These are not things that you could just say, well, yeah, it's just a lucky guess, or, no, it's something big. So here is the Jesus of the Quran who does all of these things. It's interesting that this is mentioned, by the way, in the Bible. And it even talks about prophets before Jesus who did the same thing. Even the bones of Ezekiel were used to bring back the dead. And also that others were cured of blindness and sickness and so on. But the main point here is that Jesus fulfills all of the things that were mentioned in the Old Testament. Where the problem really comes in, as far as the Muslim point of view, that the Jews did not want to accept that Jesus was coming with this message, because in fact he was very, very hard on them. And if you read the New Testament, you find that he took a whip and he drove the money changers out of the temple. And those being whipped considered that wasn't very nice. And he kind of put them out of business and probably hurt a little bit along the way. So there was a lot of objection to what he was saying. And he called them vipers, that's not nice, from their point of view. A viper, a snake. And also it mentions that he said that if your righteousness didn't exceed theirs, that you couldn't even go to heaven. So the Pharisees, the ones who were charged with the responsibility of the religion for the rabbis, etc. at that time, they were really being put down a lot by Jesus. So you can understand why that they had a real thing to try to discredit him from the beginning. They didn't want anything to do with him, and they tried in every possible way to shut down his message and those who would follow him. He had quite a following, at least from what we understand from the Bible, because it says very clearly that in all four Gospels mention this. Now, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, don't necessarily agree on every point. Some of them don't have this part of the story, some don't have that part. Some actually contradict how some of the things happen. But this one particular event is clear, and it's on all four. All four Gospels talk about what we call Palm Sunday. Everybody know what I'm talking about, Palm Sunday, when they laid down the palms as he entered, the palm leaves, or the big things that they laid on the street And then he rode in on the donkey. And they were laying him down, and the saying says, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. And then he comes in on the donkey. All four of them speak about this subject. So it looks like he was well received on that Sunday. And Passover is coming up on the next Saturday, because that was the Feast of Passover, remember? And at Friday, when the sun goes down, they have to shut down everything, and they can't do anything till the sun goes down on Saturday. So, of course, we know he was put on the cross on Friday, and they had to get him off of the cross on Friday before the sun went down, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to bury him. Or actually, they didn't bury him, they put him in the sepulchre. But the point here is, what happened Sunday? I mean, everybody's going for it, but what happened by Wednesday night or Thursday night, and, you know, when everything fell apart? Have you ever wondered about that? How could everybody be for you on Sunday, and by Thursday they're ready to hang you? What happened? And that's a good question. You can look to some of the Apocrypha, and you can look to some of the recent archaeological finds of some of the texts, and try to discover, as I have spent a lot of time with that. And we'll be very candid in telling you that I don't think I found anything out that anybody didn't find before me or after. You can go to Barnes & Noble and buy the books and probably find a better dissertation on the subject than I came up with anyway. But the point was that they all agreed that there's a lot more out there than what we really have today in the King James Version of the Bible. So that means that I need to speak about the book a little bit, the Bible, as you know it today in English, just to give clarification. The English language didn't exist until the Saxons invaded the Anglican and the England, and when they went in, the Normans invaded the Saxons. We'll go get the story straight. That was in 1066 AD. And after that came what we call the English language. What we're speaking today is a derivative of 950 years of daily changing language. Prior to 950 years ago, it didn't exist. So that means that none of the revelations that we're speaking about today were actually in the English language. So it would be impossible. That there isn't any way that it could be in the English language. So therefore, anything you read in English is a translation of something. You have to understand that. And the oldest manuscripts that we have from the Jewish text, and we're talking now about the Old Testament, are actually, extant today, are not as old as some of the texts that we have. We have a lot more stuff available, believe it or not, from the New Testament than we do the Old Testament. Did you know that? There's just a whole lot more out there since 2,000 years ago than there is before 2,000 years ago, with the exception of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's a huge question mark on them because there was a big effort to try to make sure everybody would accept these scrolls as being older than 2,000 years ago. Because if they're newer than 2,000 years ago, they got a serious problem. Because nowhere in there did they refer to Jesus and the miracles of the ascension or of the cross or anything else. So it means they have to predate that, otherwise you've got a problem with your particular denomination, what you're trying to preach, because it won't be there. Now, do we have any Bible students here? Anybody who's been through seminary school or know anything about it? Even first semester. Anybody? Okay. Everybody heard, you know the Gospels, right? Okay, the first three are called synoptic. And then the John Gospel stands alone. After that follows, I think something between 12 or 16, depending on who you think wrote them, books are attributed actually to Paul. The majority of the New Testament really, I'm talking about books, is going to rest on Paul. So if Paul is not credible, and that's just a statement of hypothetically, then you would be missing over half the New Testament. And if it is credible, then you've got a problem with a lot of the Gospels because they don't match. And give you just one example of that so you can think about it.